André Rieu is known around the world as the man who brings joy through music. People see him smiling on stage, moving his violin with ease, and leading an orchestra that looks like a family celebrating together. His concerts feel warm and welcoming. Many in the audience laugh, cry, and feel connected to something gentle and beautiful. For millions, his waltzes are not just music. They are moments of relief, a few minutes where the heart becomes lighter. Because of this, many believe that André's life has always been happy and full of joy. But the man people see on stage is only one side of his life. Behind the smile and the graceful movement, there is a person who has carried heavy pressure for decades. His work requires constant travel, rehearsals, planning, and responsibility. He is not only the artist, he is also the leader of a large orchestra and staff. Many families depend on him. Every performance is not just music. It is a promise he feels he must fulfill. This creates stress that does not stop when the music stops. There have also been difficult moments with his health. There were times he became very weak, experienced severe dizziness, and struggled with balance. This made performing extremely hard. Yet, the audience never saw this. On stage, he still smiled, still played, still tried to give everything he had. People clapped and cheered, unaware that after the concert, he sometimes needed to rest for hours just to recover. His strength was not in pretending to be perfect, but in continuing even when it was painful. For André, music is not just a job or entertainment. It is something he has depended on emotionally since childhood. It was his way of coping when life felt cold or lonely. It was how he kept going when he felt misunderstood or exhausted. Music helped him feel alive when everything else felt heavy. This is why people often say they feel something special in his concerts. The warmth they feel is real. It comes from a place of personal experience, not from performance technique alone. The joyful atmosphere of his concerts is something he built intentionally. He wanted to show that classical music can be full of life, not stiff or serious. He wanted people of any age or background to enjoy it. When people smile or hold hands while listening, he feels he has done something meaningful. But even as he brings joy to others, he also carries memories, pressure, and pain that the audience cannot see. His music feels healing because it comes from someone who needed healing himself. The gentleness is not decoration. It is the result of a life that understood how heavy silence and loneliness can be. But to understand why his music feels like healing, we have to begin where joy was absent. Some musicians grow up surrounded by warmth and encouragement. But André Rieu's earliest years were shaped by silence that had nothing to do with sound. He was born on the 1st of October 1949 in Maastricht, a city in the Netherlands that was still emotionally recovering from the effects of World War II. The war was over, but the atmosphere remained heavy. People were rebuilding homes, rebuilding routines, and rebuilding themselves. Many families did not speak much about feelings. They focused on survival, order, and discipline. This emotional distance shaped the environment André entered as a child. His father, André Rieu Sr., was a respected conductor. He led orchestras with power and control. On stage, he could move musicians and audiences with strong emotional force. But at home, he did not express love in the same way. He believed that children needed discipline, structure, and silence. He did not show affection, give warm hugs, or offer gentle words. He was a father who provided food and education, but not emotional connection. André has said in later interviews that his father never once told him, "I love you." His mother, Katharina, was also a strict and disciplined person. She kept the house extremely organized. Everything had to be done on time and exactly the right way. The home was clean, orderly, and quiet. But it was not a place where a child could freely express emotions. If André cried, there was no comfort. If he wanted to talk, There was no space for conversation. The house was full of rules, but empty of warmth. There were 6 children in the Rieu family. André had siblings around him, yet he felt alone. Everyone lived carefully and quietly, under the expectations of their father. The house was full of music, because musicians came and went, and rehearsals were always happening. Yet the music felt like something distant. It did not feel like joy. It felt like duty, like something controlled instead of shared. When André was around 5 or 6 years old, he was given a violin. The violin was almost larger than he could hold. But something happened when he touched it. For the first time, he felt something that was his, something he could express through. He may not have had affectionate parents, but he had strings and sound that could carry emotion. The violin became the one place where he could release feelings he could not speak. He practiced alone in his room. In those quiet hours, the violin became his only friend that listened. There were nights where he held the violin not to improve his skill, but to feel less lonely. When the house fell silent after dinner and everyone disappeared into separate spaces, he stayed awake, playing slow notes, not for an audience, but for his heart. The music did not sound joyful. It sounded like a child trying to comfort himself. No one came to watch. No one praised him. He did not play for approval. He played to feel alive. His father saw music as something serious and professional. He did not understand André's desire to play with emotion. He believed music should be strict and controlled. When André tried to smile or play lightly, his father corrected him. "This is work, not fun." That message stayed in André's mind for years. Music, which had been his emotional escape, now also became something he had to protect. He could not let others take the joy out of it. School also did not give him the warmth he needed. Teachers focused on correctness, not creativity. He followed instructions, behaved well, and did what was expected, but he still felt unseen. He was a child who had feelings, but no place to express them. He learned early to stay quiet. But inside, a desire for connection and emotional expression grew stronger. As he grew older, music became even more important to him. The violin was no longer just comfort, it became identity. He did not want to play music in the way his father did. He wanted music to feel human, soft, warm, and alive. He wanted to create moments where people could feel comfort and joy, not pressure and perfection. That early loneliness shaped his mission. He did not want audiences to feel the same emotional coldness he felt growing up when he later began leading orchestras. His goal was not just to play music. His goal was to make people smile, relax, and feel welcomed. This is why his concerts are full of light and laughter today. They are built from the exact opposite of what he experienced as a child. Everything he does on stage is something he wished someone had done for him when he was small. But at that young age, he did not yet know how difficult it would be to bring this vision into reality. He only knew what he wanted music to feel like, human and warm. However, the world of classical music he was about to enter was not open to warmth. It was full of tradition, strict rules, and criticism. It did not welcome someone who wanted to make people smile or laugh while listening to classical music. The violin gave him hope, but the path he wanted to follow was one that the established music world did not respect. But when he tried to carry this dream into the world tried to crush it too. When André was old enough to continue his musical education, he entered the Royal Conservatory of Brussels. Many young musicians dream of such a place, believing it will be full of inspiration and guidance. But for André, the conservatory was another environment where emotion was kept out and rules were more important than expression. The building was large, serious, and quiet. Students walked through the halls with their eyes down, focused on tasks, exams, and technical perfection. It was a place where music was treated like a formula, not a feeling. The teachers there had strong knowledge and high standards. They were respected in the classical music world. But their approach to teaching saw music mainly as technical work. Every note had to be correct. Every movement had to follow tradition. The goal was to match the sound that had already been accepted by past generations. There was no room to try something new, no room to show personality, no room for joy. If a student played with too much expression, the teachers would stop them and correct their style. They believed emotion made the music messy. They wanted students to sound clean, controlled, and proper. Music, to them, was something built from rules, not something that came from the heart. For André, this was difficult. He had grown up using the violin to express himself. When he played with feeling. He believed music was meant to connect people, not impress them. But at the conservatory, he learned quickly that expressing emotion was considered unprofessional. The message was clear. Technique mattered, emotion did not. This difference made him feel out of place. Other students practiced for hours, focusing on speed, tuning, and technical exercises. They wanted to win competitions and become respected in formal orchestras. They did not understand why André wanted music to feel warm and alive. Some of them even laughed at him for smiling while playing. To them, smiling looked childish. It made him seem unserious. They believed classical music must look serious, almost like a strict ceremony. Teachers also criticized him for this. When he smiled on stage or swayed while playing, they would correct him. "Do not move so much," they said. "Do not express. Focus on precision." André tried to follow their instructions at first. He wanted to learn. He wanted to improve. But every time he held back his natural expression, the music felt empty to him. The violin did not feel like a friend anymore. It felt like an assignment. He noticed something important during this time. Many of the students were talented, but they did not look happy. They played well, but without emotion. The music sounded correct, but it did not touch the heart. André realized that the classical music world was full of skill, but lacking warmth. He began to understand that this was not just a personal challenge, it was something bigger. The way classical music was taught and performed made many people feel distant from it. It did not welcome the everyday listener. It did not invite them to feel. This realization did not push him to quit. Instead, it helped him define his purpose. If the classical world was cold, then he wanted to bring warmth. If the classical world was strict, he wanted to bring joy. If the classical world demanded seriousness, he wanted to bring laughter. He did not want to disrespect tradition, but he wanted to open the doors so more people could enter and actually feel something. This was the beginning of his quiet rebellion. He did not shout. He did not argue. He simply kept playing with the emotion that felt natural to him. Even when others mocked him, he continued to smile while playing. He believed if music did not make people feel, then what was the purpose of it? But this belief also created difficulty. He did not fit the image that classical institutions wanted to present. So, even though he was skilled, opportunities did not come easily. Many did not take him seriously. Some. He said he would never succeed with his way of playing because audiences expected tradition, not enjoyment. They told him that people did not want classical music to be fun. But André had seen real joy in small moments when he played informally. He saw how even simple melodies could make someone smile or relax. He saw how music could bring people together who normally had nothing in common. He felt these reactions deeply, because they were responses he himself had wanted as a lonely child. He believed the world needed music that felt alive, music that could reach the heart, not just impress the mind. This belief guided him, even when the world around him said he was wrong. He left the conservatory carrying two things: strong technical training and an even stronger sense of purpose. He knew exactly what kind of music he wanted to create, and he understood that the path ahead would not be easy. But he also knew something else. He did not have to walk that path alone. There was one person, who understood him. One person who believed in his vision. One person who saw not only his skill, but also his need to bring warmth into music and life. And one woman would become both the foundation and fire that helped him prove it. When André met Marjorie, something changed in his life that he had never experienced before. She was calm, thoughtful, and warm in a way that felt safe to him. From their early conversations, he felt understood. She listened to him, not just to the words he spoke, but also to the feelings behind them. For someone who grew up in a house where emotions were not welcomed, this was new. With her, he did not need to hide. He did not need to hold his feelings inside. He could be himself. Marjorie had a strong personality, but it was not harsh. She was practical and intelligent, but also gentle. She believed in education and culture, and she supported him in ways that did not push or pressure him. When he spoke about music, she did not treat his dream as childish. She respected it. She understood that for André, music was not just a job, it was his way of feeling alive. She saw the emotional side of his music, not just the technical skill. She believed that music could bring people together and help them feel something deep. This belief matched André's own view perfectly. Their relationship grew naturally. They spent time together, shared ideas, and slowly built trust. For André, this was his first real experience of emotional connection. He felt that someone finally saw him not just as a musician, but as a human being who wanted warmth, understanding, and closeness. The loneliness from his childhood did not disappear instantly, but now he had someone to face life with. That made all the difference. However, his parents did not approve of their relationship. His father believed that emotion made a person weak, and he saw love as a distraction. His mother valued control and structure, and she did not want André to choose a life that did not match the image she imagined. They did not understand what Marjorie meant to him, and they did not try to. When André and Marjorie decided to get married, the reaction from his family was cold. His mother refused to accept the marriage. This was painful for him, because even though he had never truly felt loved at home, a part of him still hoped his parents would support his happiness. But they did not. When André chose Marjorie, he was not only choosing love, he was choosing a different way of living. He was choosing warmth over coldness, understanding over silence, and emotional connection over rules. This choice created distance between him and his parents, a distance that never fully healed. But this separation also allowed him to grow into the person he needed to be. He was no longer seeking approval. He was building a life based on love rather than duty. Marjorie stood beside him, not just as a partner, but also as someone who believed in his dream. She supported him when he wanted to create music that was different from tradition. She encouraged him when others mocked his smile and emotion. She knew the world did not understand his vision yet, but she believed that if he continued, one day people would feel what he felt. Their dream was not to become rich or famous. Their dream was to show that classical music could be warm, joyful, and welcoming, something that made people feel good, not something that made them feel judged or distant. They imagined concerts where the audience would not sit stiffly, but would smile, move, and enjoy the music. They imagined music that reached the heart, not just the mind. They believed music could be healing, the same way it had been healing for André's loneliness. But dreams alone are not enough. To bring this vision into reality, they needed to build something from the ground up. They needed to find musicians, organize rehearsals, secure places to play, and earn money to survive. This would require effort, time, sacrifice, and constant belief, especially in times when there was little to hold on to. Love gave André emotional strength, but now they needed practical strength to turn the dream into a life. But dreams, no matter how beautiful, must be fed often with everything you have. In 1978, André took one of the first serious steps toward the musical world he dreamed of. He formed a small group called the Maastricht Salon Orchestra. This was not a large or famous orchestra. It was modest, with limited resources and simple performance settings. They did not play in grand concert halls. They played in small community spaces, town gatherings, and events where people sat close to the musicians, almost like a family sitting together in the same room. The sound did not travel across stadiums. It traveled across faces, faces that André could actually see. These small performances became very meaningful to him. For the first time, he could watch how people reacted to the music in real time. He could see how their eyes brightened during gentle parts, how their shoulders relaxed when the melody softened, how they smiled when a familiar tune began. There was no seriousness here, no strict rules, no emotionless posture. People were simply people, enjoying music in a natural way. This was the first time in André's life that music connected him to others in a warm and human way. In his childhood home, music was something controlled, something performed without emotion. In conservatory halls, music was something tested and judged. But here, music was something shared. It was simple, direct, and sincere. And for André, it felt like home in a way his actual home never had. The Salon Orchestra was not wealthy. They did not earn a lot of money. Sometimes payments were small or delayed. Sometimes they played in cold rooms or poorly lit spaces. They did not have professional lighting, expensive costumes, or grand staging. But what they did have was connection, and connection was the one thing André valued most. He saw that when music allowed people to feel, they responded with honesty, not formality. During these performances, people did not sit stiffly like in formal classical concerts. They laughed, whispered, tapped their feet, or even hummed along. André noticed that people did not want to be intimidated by music. They wanted to enjoy it. He realized something important. People loved classical melodies, but they did not enjoy the strict environment that usually came with them. It was not the music people found difficult, it was the atmosphere. This understanding planted the first seeds of what would become his future vision. He did not want classical music to remain locked behind tradition. He wanted it to be open, joyful, and human. He wanted people of all backgrounds, ages, and cultures to feel welcome in the audience. He wanted them to leave the concert feeling lighter and happier than when they arrived. The Salon Orchestra gave him a safe space to experiment with how music could create connection. He began adding small touches that traditional orchestras did not use. He smiled while playing. He spoke to the audience between pieces. He encouraged musicians to look happy and interact naturally. Some might say these were small things, but they made a big difference. People began to feel music instead of just listening to it. This period also formed strong friendships between André and the musicians. They were not just co-workers. They spent long hours together, rehearsing, traveling, and performing. They shared meals, laughter, and challenges. For André, who had grown up in a home where emotional closeness was missing, this was his first real experience of community. He felt, for the first time, that he belonged, not because of his skill, but because of the connection he created. During these years, he observed something else that strengthened his dream. When they played waltzes, something remarkable happened. People smiled more. Couples held hands or swayed gently. The atmosphere became even warmer. André saw that the waltz had a unique emotional power. It invited people to relax, to enjoy, to be present. It did not demand seriousness. It encouraged feelings. This observation stayed with him. He realized the waltz was not just a dance or a musical pattern. It was a social language, a way of making people feel welcome. This insight slowly shaped his future direction. It did not happen overnight, but little by little, he began imagining an orchestra that would focus on this feeling. He started to picture an ensemble much larger than the Salon Orchestra. An orchestra that played waltzes with joy, warmth, and movement. An orchestra that could travel around the world, bringing this feeling to everyone. A place where musicians could smile, where the audience could relax, where music could feel like a celebration of life instead of a lecture. The Salon Orchestra was the starting point. It gave him proof that music could create happiness when the setting was warm and informal. It gave him the emotional confidence he had lacked in childhood. It gave him a reason to believe that his dream was not only possible, but needed. But even though the Salon Orchestra was meaningful and successful in its own small way, it was not enough for what he wanted to build. The world of classical music still looked down on joy. Many musicians and critics still believed music must be serious to be respected. André wanted to grow, expand, and share this warmth on a larger scale. He was ready to imagine something bigger. But the world he was stepping into was not ready to accept change so easily. But the world was not yet ready to smile with him. By 1987, André was ready to take a much bigger step. The Salon Orchestra had shown him that music could create warmth and bring people together, but it was small. He wanted to build something larger, something that could carry joy to bigger audiences and travel further than small halls and community gatherings. He wanted an orchestra that would play waltzes with life, movement, and emotion. He wanted classical music to feel welcoming, not distant. With this goal in his heart, he founded the Johann Strauss Orchestra. In the beginning, the orchestra had only 12 musicians. It was not a grand organization. They practiced in modest spaces. They used whatever resources they could afford. But what mattered was the intention. André wanted the orchestra to feel like a family on stage. He encouraged laughter, eye contact, and natural expression. He did not want rigid faces or stiff movements. He wanted musicians to look like they enjoyed what they were doing. This was unusual in classical music at the time. However, not everyone saw value in what he was trying to create. Many music critics, teachers, and professionals looked down on him. They believed classical music should stay formal, serious, and traditional. When they saw André smiling while playing, or when they saw musicians interacting warmly on stage, they said he was making classical music look childish. Some critics even said he was trying to entertain instead of perform, and that this made his work less respectable. André did not agree. He believed that entertainment and emotional expression were not weaknesses. They were necessary for music to reach the heart. But believing in something and surviving financially are two different things. The early years of the Johann Strauss Orchestra were extremely difficult. Ticket sales were small. Many concerts did not earn enough money to cover costs. André had to borrow money from banks and sometimes from friends just to keep the orchestra functioning. He felt responsible not only for himself, but for every musician who had believed in his vision. This pressure grew heavier each month. There were times when André could not afford to eat properly. He would skip meals to make sure his musicians were paid. There were nights when he sat with financial documents spread across a table, trying to figure out how to keep going. Some months, it seemed impossible. The stress was constant. Even when he smiled on stage, he carried the weight of debt and worry. Traveling for performances was also tiring. The orchestra often performed in small towns or lesser-known venues where they did not earn much money. They traveled in simple buses. They stayed in low-cost hotels. The schedule was demanding. Rehearsals took energy. Performances took even more. After the concerts, they packed equipment, traveled again, then rehearsed again. There was little time to rest. Slowly, without even noticing it at first, André began to feel physically and emotionally exhausted. His body was stressed. His mind was stressed. But he did not allow himself to stop. He believed that if he paused, the entire dream might collapse. He carried a responsibility that was heavy for any one person to hold. Even so, the pause orchestra stayed together because the musicians trusted him. They saw how hard he worked, how much he cared, and how deeply he believed in what they were building. They were not performing for fame. They were working for something meaningful. They were trying to bring warmth into a world that often treated classical music as something distant and difficult. André also had Marjorie beside him through all of this. She helped with planning, organization, and emotional support. She reminded him why he started in the first place. She helped him stay focused when doubt or fear tried to grow stronger. Without her, the dream might have stopped. But even with her support, the pressure did not go away. There were moments when André questioned whether he had made the right choice. He wondered if he was trying to change something too big, something the world did not want to change. He wondered if classical music was meant to stay as it was, closed and formal. But each time he felt doubt, he remembered the smiles he saw during the salon orchestra performances. He remembered the feeling of connection, of lightness, of shared joy. He believed the world still needed that. So, he continued, even when the future looked uncertain. He kept rehearsing. He kept performing. He kept smiling on stage, even when his heart was tired. His dream was too important to let go. And though the world seemed slow to accept his idea, he believed that one day people would understand. The orchestra continued performing wherever they could. Some audiences loved them. Others did not know what to think. Some critics wrote negative reviews. But slowly, a few more people began to enjoy the warmer, more open feeling of their concerts. Small signs of hope appeared, but nothing big enough to secure the orchestra's future until one night. One performance, just one, would change everything. It would take André and his orchestra from financial struggle to worldwide recognition. It would show the world what he had always believed. It would prove that music could be joyful, emotional, and open to everyone. And then, one performance changed everything. In 1995, André and the Johann Strauss Orchestra were invited to perform during a UEFA Champions League event. It was not a full concert. It was only one piece, one moment in front of a large audience that did not come for classical music. The stadium was filled with football fans, not concert-goers. People were loud, excited, and full of energy. Many did not expect to hear classical music there. It seemed like an unusual setting, but André believed that music could reach anyone, anywhere. So he chose to perform Shostakovich's Waltz No. 2. When the music began, something unexpected happened. The stadium, which had been loud and restless just moments before, began to grow quiet. The sound of the waltz floated through the air in a way that softened the atmosphere. People who had come for a sports match began to listen. The music carried a gentle rhythm that felt familiar even to those who had never heard classical music before. It did not demand attention, it simply invited it. As the melody continued, the silence in the stadium became deeper. It was not a forced silence, it was a natural silence, the kind that happens when something touches people without them expecting it. For a few minutes, thousands of people listened together, sharing the same calm feeling. It did not matter who they were, where they were from, or what they believed. In that moment, they were connected by the music. It was one of the first times André saw his vision happening on a large scale. Music was doing exactly what he always believed it could do: bring people together. After that performance, something changed. People who saw it wanted to know who the man with the violin was. They wanted to hear more. The waltz became popular in a way no one predicted. It was played on radio stations, used in television broadcasts, and shared in Enesto, homes across different countries. For the first time, the Johann Strauss Orchestra began to receive invitations to perform not just in small halls, but in large venues and international events. This moment did not just make André well known. It made his style of music recognized and appreciated. He had proven that classical music could be joyful, emotional, and accessible. He showed that people did not have to understand music theory or history to enjoy a melody. They only needed to feel it. And people felt it. As demand grew, André and his orchestra began touring across Europe, then to other parts of the world. Concerts became larger, auditoriums filled. Some performances were held outdoors in beautiful public spaces where thousands could gather. Audiences were diverse, young, old, local, international. People laughed, smiled, and even danced. They did not sit stiffly in silence. They participated. They enjoyed the music the way André had always hoped people would. The success felt exciting, and for the first time in many years, there was financial relief. The orchestra could afford better equipment, better travel arrangements, and more musicians. The work they had done for so long, with so much difficulty, was finally being recognized. André's ideas were no longer seen as strange or childish. They were seen as refreshing and meaningful. Yet, even in this joyful moment, the pace of touring and performing became intense. When success arrived, it did not come slowly. It came fast and demanded constant work. Concert schedules became tight. There were rehearsals almost every day. There were travel plans, stage setups, and endless planning. André tried to give his best every time. He wanted every audience to feel the warmth he had worked so hard to create. He was happy, but he was also tired. The stress of keeping everything running smoothly began to add weight to his days. He now had not only musicians depending on him, but also staff members, event partners, and audiences across many countries. The orchestra had become something much larger than 12 musicians in a small room. It had become a global operation. People saw the success, the applause, the lights, and the smiles. But they did not see the growing pressure underneath. André still believed deeply in his mission, but now the mission came with responsibility on a scale he had never experienced before. The joy was real, but so was the burden. For a while, the world only saw the brightness of this new chapter. The music was reaching millions. The dream was no longer a dream, it was happening. But success is not only a reward, it is also a demand, a commitment, and a weight that grows heavier over time. The music was carrying him forward, but behind the scenes, his body and mind were beginning to struggle with the endless pace. But success was not a crown. It was a clock, counting down. As André's popularity grew, the number of concerts increased quickly. What had once been occasional performances became a long, continuous schedule of traveling, rehearsing, performing, and planning. The orchestra now performed in many countries every year. There were times when they traveled from one city to the next, without much rest in between. Some days began early in the morning and did not end until late at night. The excitement of success was still there, but the pace was demanding. The joy that he had once shared freely through music now came with a heavy amount of responsibility. The Johann Strauss Orchestra was no longer a small group. It became a large organization with many musicians, technical staff, stage workers, drivers, cooks, and planners. More than 100 people depended on André. They relied on him for their income, stability, and future. This responsibility was not something he took lightly. He cared deeply about the people he worked with. He wanted them to feel supported and respected. But this also meant that he felt pressure constantly. Every decision he made affected many lives. In addition to being the main performer, André became the person who managed the business side of the orchestra. He had to think about contracts, venues, transportation, marketing, and finances. He had to make sure every performance had the right equipment, proper lighting, and well-planned rehearsals. There were suppliers to pay, hotels to book, and tickets to sell. Although he had a team to help him, most of the final decisions rested on him. When problems came up, and they did, he was the one who had to solve them. This role was very different from what most musicians experience. Many musicians focus only on practicing and playing, while others handle the business side. But André was at the center of everything. He was the artist, the leader, and the manager. It was a huge amount of work. On stage, he gave his energy to the audience. Offstage, he gave his attention to the orchestra and business responsibilities. There was very little time left for rest. Even when he felt tired, he did not want to slow down. He believed that if he rested, the momentum would stop. He also felt responsible for the orchestra members and their families. If the orchestra stopped performing, they would lose income. André did not want that to happen. This sense of responsibility was strong, but it was also heavy. It pushed him to keep going, even when his body started to show signs of strain. Touring constantly means crossing time zones, sleeping in hotels, eating meals at unusual times, and living out of suitcases. It affects the body in a slow and quiet way. At first, André ignored the tiredness. He was used to working hard, but with time, the exhaustion began to show in his health. He started to feel dizzy spells, headaches, and fatigue that did not go away even with rest. He sometimes felt like the ground beneath him was shifting. At first, he thought it was just stress. He kept performing, thinking it would pass, but it did not. Eventually, he was diagnosed with a virus that affected his inner ear. The inner ear is responsible for balance. When it is damaged, the world can feel like it is moving, even when you are standing still. For someone who performs with a violin, moves on stage, and stands for long periods, this condition was extremely difficult. It made even simple movements challenging. The dizziness came without warning. Some days were better than others, but the uncertainty became a constant fear. He worried that he might lose his balance during a performance. Despite this, André continued performing. He did not want to cancel shows. He did not want to disappoint audiences or put the orchestra's financial stability at risk. But every concert became harder. Sometimes he had to hold on to objects backstage to stay steady before walking on. Sometimes after finishing a performance, he was too exhausted to speak. Yet, on stage, he smiled. He played. He made sure the audience felt joy. No one knew what it cost him physically. The emotional pressure grew as well. He knew people saw him as the joyful violinist who made hearts feel light. They did not see the tiredness, the financial stress, or the fear of losing the ability to perform. He did not want to show weakness. He had spent his whole life learning to keep moving forward, even when things were hard. So he continued. He rehearsed. He toured. He gave everything. This continued until the pressure, travel, physical strain, and emotional weight became too much. His body began to break down more frequently. There were periods when he had to cancel concerts at the last moment. This caused disappointment among fans and created financial losses. Each cancellation added more stress. Even then, he pushed himself to return quickly. Rest never lasted long. And just when he was trying to manage the effects of exhaustion and illness, the world changed in a way no one expected. A global pandemic arrived. Concert halls closed. Travel stopped. Audiences stayed home. The music stopped not just for André, but for performers everywhere. For the first time in decades, André's days were no longer filled with sound, planning, and travel. His schedule went from constant motion to complete stillness. He believed music was his way of coping with everything in life. But now, even the music had to pause. And then, when he needed music most, the world went silent. In early 2020, when the pandemic spread across the world, everything stopped. Concert halls closed, borders shut down, public gatherings were canceled. The Johann Strauss Orchestra, which had spent decades traveling and performing almost non-stop, suddenly had no performances at all. The schedule that once filled every month of the year went empty in a matter of days. For the first time in his career, André could not perform. There were no audiences waiting, no rehearsals, no tour plans. The silence was not a break. It was a shock. For André, music was not just work. It was his daily rhythm, his emotional outlet, and his identity. Without it, the days felt long and heavy. He had built his life around concerts, planning, and preparing for the next performance. Now he woke up with nothing to organize and no sense of movement. He was at home like everyone else, watching the world become still. At first, he tried to stay hopeful. Maybe this would pass quickly. Maybe concerts would return soon. But as weeks turned into months, it became clear this silence would not end soon. The orchestra had grown large by this time. More than 100 people worked with him: musicians, technicians, stage workers, drivers, office staff, and many others depended on the orchestra for their income. With no concerts, there was no ticket revenue. And for most orchestras, without concerts, there is no financial support. But André could not accept letting his orchestra suffer. He did not want musicians worrying about rent, food, or their families. So, he made a difficult decision. He began paying everyone's salaries from his personal savings. This was not easy. The amounts were large, and there was no clear date when income would return, but he believed it was the right thing to do. The orchestra was not just a workplace. It was a group of people who had shared years of travel, effort, and dedication. He said once that the orchestra was like family, and during the pandemic, he proved it with his actions. However, as the months continued and the concerts did not return, the financial pressure increased. Money that had taken decades to earn was being spent quickly. Savings that were meant to support his work and future began to shrink. André tried to remain calm, but the situation was stressful. The uncertainty was constant. He could not predict when the world would reopen. He could not plan ahead. He could only continue supporting his staff and hope time would bring a solution. During this period, André also had to face a painful thought. In his possession were 2 Stradivarius violins, instruments that were not only financially valuable but emotionally important to him. They had traveled with him across the world. They had been part of his life story. They were symbols of his dedication to music. Selling one of them would bring in enough money to support the orchestra for longer, but it would also feel like giving up something deeply personal. He considered it seriously, not because he wanted to, but because he cared more about people than possessions. He said that if selling a violin would keep the orchestra alive, he would do it. This showed how much responsibility he felt. For him, music had always been about connection, not ownership. Still, the decision was painful to even consider. In the end, he did not sell the violin, but the fact that he reached that point showed the emotional weight of the situation. During these months of silence, André continued to play music, but in a very different way. There were no audiences, no applause, no stage lights. Sometimes he played alone in a quiet room. The music was not a performance. It was a way of staying grounded. He played to calm his mind, to stay close to the thing that had always guided him. Music became like a prayer, something personal, private, and necessary. He also spent time thinking. The slow pace forced him to look at his life differently. For decades, he had been moving so fast that there was no time to reflect. Now, time was all he had. He looked back on his childhood, on the early years of the orchestra, on the difficult moments, and on the successes. He thought about why he played music in the first place. The silence made him remember that music had always been his way of finding warmth in a world that could be cold. The pandemic was difficult in many ways. It brought financial strain, emotional stress, and uncertainty. But it also reminded André that the heart of his work was never about large stages or full arenas. It was about the feeling that music brought to him and to others. This reminder helped him keep faith while waiting for the world to open again. Eventually, concerts slowly returned. Not all at once, and not without challenges, but they began again. Audiences came back with strong emotion. Many people cried during the first performances, not just because of the music, but because they were relieved to feel connected to something again. André felt the same. The return to the stage was not just a professional event. It was a return to something that had kept him alive emotionally. But even as life started to move forward again, another difficult moment was waiting for him. The pandemic had taken silence from him, but something ahead would take much more. But the hardest blow was still waiting. In 2024, André faced one of the most frightening moments of his life. During a performance in Mexico, he suddenly felt overwhelming dizziness, the same kind that had troubled him years earlier. Under the bright stage lights and in front of thousands of people, his balance slipped. The world around him began to spin. His body could no longer keep up with the demands he had pushed through for years. Before anyone could react, he collapsed on stage. The music stopped. The hall fell into shock. His team rushed toward him, and the audience watched in confusion and fear. He was taken off stage, and the performance could not continue. The collapse was not just a physical incident. It was a warning. His body had reached its limit. For years, he had ignored the signals of exhaustion, pushing himself because he believed the orchestra, the audiences, and the dream depended on him. But now, he could not push anymore. His health could not be postponed or managed quietly behind the scenes. It needed attention. Recovery was slow and difficult. It required rest, medical care, and patience. None of these came easily to André. He was used to moving, planning, and performing. He had spent most of his life in constant motion. Now, he had to sit still. He had to ask for help. He had to accept that his body had changed. Some days, he felt progress. Other days, the dizziness returned, reminding him that recovery was not something he could control with willpower alone. During this period, he had to step back from performing. Tours were postponed or adjusted. Rehearsals were shortened. It was emotionally painful for him because music had always been his source of strength. But he had to learn something new. Slowing down did not mean giving up. It meant surviving. His family played a big role in his recovery. Marjorie supported him with the same steady presence she always had. Their son, Pierre, stepped in to handle much of the organizational work, protecting André from stress whenever possible. The orchestra members waited patiently, understanding that his health was more important than any schedule. The support reminded André that he was not alone. This was not like his childhood. He was surrounded by people who cared deeply for him, not because of the music, but because of the person he was. As he slowly returned to the stage, things had to change. He could not keep the same pace as before. His performances needed to be planned around rest, recovery, and balance. Concerts became shorter. Travel plans were simplified. Rehearsals were scheduled carefully. André learned to listen to his body, something he had rarely done throughout his life. This change did not weaken his music. Instead, it transformed it. His playing became softer, more gentle, and more thoughtful. The music did not try to impress. It tried to connect. Listeners could feel the difference. The music now carried more life experience, more understanding, and more gratitude. It reflected a man who had survived exhaustion, illness, and loss, and who still chose to play. When he stood on stage again, the moment felt different. Audiences watched him with deeper respect. They understood what it took for him to be there. The applause was not just appreciation for the performance. It was appreciation for the man who continued to share himself through music, even when it required strength most people never see. As he played, the orchestra followed his slower, warmer tone. The music felt closer, more personal. People in the audience often described the concerts as emotional, in a way that was hard to explain. The joy was still there, but now it was mixed with gratitude. André was not just performing music. He was showing what it means to keep going even when life becomes heavy. The collapse in 2024 could have been the end of his performing life. Many musicians might have retired, but André chose to continue not in the same way, but in a wiser and more balanced way. He adjusted, learned, and accepted change. He understood that music did not need to be loud or fast to be meaningful. It needed to be honest. His return to the stage was not a display of victory. It was a quiet act of resilience. It showed that survival can look gentle, steady, and humble. It showed that a person can lose strength and still keep their purpose. His music now carries that message in every note. He no longer plays to prove anything. He plays to share something. But the greatest legacy he leaves is not sound. It is something far more rare. As the years have passed, André's life has changed in many ways. But one thing has remained constant: the presence of the people who support him. Marjorie has been by his side since the early days, long before large audiences and worldwide tours. She was there when concerts were small, when money was tight, and when the future was uncertain. She believed in him when others did not. Her support was not loud or dramatic. It was steady, practical, and constant. She organized schedules, made decisions, and protected him from unnecessary stress. She understood his emotional need for music and helped create a life where his work could grow. Many people see André on stage, but they do not see the careful guidance behind him. Marjorie's love was not just emotional. It helped build the foundation that made the orchestra possible. Their son, Pierre, grew up watching this world from backstage. He saw the long rehearsals, the travel, the planning, and the responsibility that came with leading an orchestra. He understood that the music was not just performance. It was a life built on commitment and care. When André's health began to weaken, Pierre stepped in without hesitation. He took on important responsibilities, managing business decisions and tour logistics so that André could focus on the music instead of the pressure. Pierre did this not only as a son, but as someone who deeply respected the work and legacy his father had built. He now helps ensure that the orchestra continues smoothly, that the musicians are supported, and that André is protected from taking on more than his body can handle. In this way, the legacy of care that began with Marjorie continues through him. And there is Daisy, André's granddaughter. She is young, still discovering life, but music runs naturally through her hands. She plays the piano with curiosity and calm. No one forces her to learn. The family believes that music must come freely, the same way it came to André when he was a child searching for comfort. When André watches Daisy play, he sees something meaningful. He sees that music can travel through generations, not as pressure, but as love. She represents the idea that warmth and connection can continue, even long after the stage lights fade. Looking back at André's journey, the meaning becomes clear. He was born in a home where love was quiet or missing. He learned early that discipline could exist without warmth. But instead of repeating that pattern, he chose something different. He chose to create a life shaped by connection, joy, and emotional openness. He built an orchestra, not to impress others, but to share the warmth he never received as a child. His life shows that a person can take pain and turn it into something gentle, something healing. This is why audiences connect so strongly with his music. It is not the notes alone that move them, it is the feeling behind them. It is the sense of relief, of calm, of kindness. People feel understood, even without words. The music carries the emotional journey of a man who knew loneliness, but chose to create comfort instead. It carries the story of someone who fought exhaustion and fear, but continued because he believed connection was worth it. It carries the story of love given late in life, but given fully. His legacy is not just in recordings, concerts, or awards. It lives in the way people feel when they hear a waltz, and their heart softens. It lives in the smiles shared between strangers sitting next to each other at his concerts. It lives in the memories families make while listening together. It lives in the musicians who learned from him that music is not only technique, but emotion. And one day, when the violin grows quiet and he no longer stands on stage, that warmth will remain. We do not listen to his music. We feel it because it was born from a heart that learned to survive without warmth, and then chose to create it for others.